Well, hello, and welcome back to Read Becca for another weekly chatty catch up on everything that I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, and some other random chit chat and cats. So I did have a good week in finishes. I finished my extra lengthy book, Seth Dickinson's new release, Exordia. I am going to, I think, do a standalone review of this because this is very complicated and very long, and I'm going to have a lot of trouble pulling my thoughts together to get something coherent out of it. But for a brief summary, I would say this is science fiction in a contemporary or nearish future, and it's chaotic first contact with a heavy message toward militarism or the effects of militarism and the collateral damage of conflict, which seems very timely right now. So that's Exordia. Then I finished up my romance book that I was reading. Well, a certain cat who shall remain nameless decided to knock the entire food container on the floor in protest of the fact that he wants lunch, even though lunchtime is not yet. Anyway, Mr. Hotshot CEO by Jackie Lau. That's what I was just going to talk about. So I did really enjoy Mr. Hotshot CEO. I talked about when I was going into this. It is a trope I'm not really usually interested in, but I had a lot of trust in Jackie Lau as an author, and she totally delivered. The book is completely littered with red flags for me as far as the type of romance and certain tropes and where they tend to go, but she did not engage in the tidy, easy ways of wrapping up those red flags. She went the hard route and really explored some interesting things. So this book is all about, as it says, the hotshot CEO, Julian Fong of Fong Industries, who is a bit of a workaholic. So the whole beginning is his family coming to him and saying, we're forcing you to take a couple weeks off of your work. His dad, who's been retired, is going to come back and work for a little bit in order to free up a couple weeks for him to take a vacation. And he does not know what to do with himself. So that's really interesting and personally kind of hard-hitting, because I've talked about this even as recent as my Q&A that I did a couple weeks ago. I got into that career mindset and lost the ability to really enjoy myself and enjoy hobbies I loved. And that's really where he is at the starting point of this book. He is trying to figure out how to take time off, how to enrich himself and enjoy himself. And he realizes quickly that he's going to need some help because he's doing things for efficiency and for self-development rather than enjoyment. And he goes out for coffee to kind of think about what he wants to do. And when he's there, he sees a woman he's seen before, and she catches his eye because she always gets her coffee and just looks at it like it's the most delighting thing in the world. He's like, I wish I could have that level of enjoyment of the simple things. And so he goes and decides to talk to her. And he talks to her. Her name is Courtney. And she is a researcher at the local, I think it's University of Toronto, because it's set in Canada. And she has a joy of the small things in life. And he offers her $5,000 in order to spend a couple weeks with him, stay with him consistently. I'm not sure why she has to live with him, but it's a romance novel. So Courtney agrees to stay with him for a couple weeks and teach him how to enjoy himself, do nothing, and find enjoyment. But that's all because she kind of found that this was a thing happening at the opportune moment. She and her sister were going on a trip to New York to get away, and that fell through because her sister had some car trouble and now she can't afford to. So this is falling in her lap, a solution to her problem there. And so she thinks that this is fitting in at the perfect time. But of course, it being a romance, as things go, they very quickly start getting Twitter-pated a bit. However, this doesn't go the simple route that would have been really easy and tropeful. This goes a very hard route, with the reason that Courtney and her sister were planning to go to New York is that she has chronic cycles of depression. And this was supposed to be something to get her away from her norms and kind of jar her out of that, because she has been feeling the onset coming of a cycle, and she just knows that it's coming soon. So as someone who has really struggled with clinical depression throughout my life, and I very much saw the realism to this depiction as we're seeing from in her head, in her perspective, because this does show both characters' perspectives throughout the book. We're seeing her increasingly start becoming annoyed and snapping about things that she wouldn't normally. We're seeing her self-doubt growing and growing. So the internal perspective was just really true to reality from my perspective. It was so well done. And the ways that Julian is starting to see that come out in her behavior and see her not quite acting like herself, even as they're still just getting to know each other, and the way that their emotions are heightening a bit her self-doubts because she's been unfooted by everything that's happening between them. And so we do get both the positives and the love of their relationship growing, but then we also get the struggles of that, of him going through processing as soon as he starts to understand what's going on, not knowing. It's such a new relationship. How should he react to this? Is this something that, he's in to stick through, or, should he try to fix it, or should he just be there to support her? And I think that's something very much that is true to a real relationship with someone who's dealing with mental illness. And I think that was handled with such nuance and care. I really loved that. I also have to say this was full of so much great description. Jackie Lau tends to incorporate culture, family, and food all throughout her books, and that is immersed here. We're getting the Toronto setting. They also go to Montreal briefly, and food throughout, lots of trips to restaurants, just the enjoyment of a cone of gelato, like everything about that provided the relief from the heavier notes that we're getting throughout. So it really gives a great balance to the book. We also have really heavy involvement of family here and culture. And I think Jackie Lau has always handled those things so well in every book that I've read from her. So this was just another big hit from Jackie Lau for me. And I'm very thankful that Shannon from That's So Co really put me onto her work, because she very much championed Lau's work, both traditionally and self-published. And it's been great so far. Then last but not least, I read Passing by Nella Larsen. This was, of course, all over BookTube a couple years ago and has remained very prominent. It is a big classic, or a tiny classic. And specifically, I noted down that I picked this up from a charity sale after seeing Shelley Swearingen and Greg from Supposedly Fun talk about it and rave about it, I think probably 2 years ago. And it lived up to everything everybody raves about, 100%. In such a tiny, short package, this really carries a punch of messaging and nuance and engagement for the reader. It's such a quiet story, but it's very dramatic and it pulls you along. So we are following two women, Claire and Irene. And it starts with Irene passing as white to go into a cafe and sit down on a hot day. And when she's there, it's a fairly empty rooftop cafe, but another woman walks in who appears white initially, and it turns out this is a woman who she knew in her childhood, who has left the Black community to live passing as white, has a husband who is white and doesn't know that she's a woman of color. And this woman, Claire, then strikes up conversation and they remember each other, hit it off, and a bit of guarding is there for Irene because Claire is an outcast in the Black community because of her living passing as white and having left the community. And that creates a lot of the drama and tension throughout. And I think that's an interesting side to the story that I personally wouldn't have thought of, that she's somewhat shunned for this. And that's just another effect of white oppressive racism that has resulted in a negative impact to her through her own community. And it's very, very hard to see her go through a lot of judgment and Irene processing how she can or should include Claire in her life, if at all, because of the judgment that other people will have on her within her own community. And so most of this book is that it's almost a Jane Austen-esque in that it's about the social interpersonal dramas, the small slights, and what's not being said between people. So after this encounter, Claire very much increasingly inserts herself in Irene's life, and Irene is not sure how much to include her because of all of these factors. And it is just so harrowing to read how much Claire misses this aspect of herself and her life, but she feels trapped, and she is very much an outsider everywhere she is. So I felt so much empathy for both characters and the difficulties that they're grappling with internally over all of this. At one point, Irene is thinking through what to do. She was caught between two allegiances, different yet the same: herself, her race, that thing that bound and suffocated her. Whatever steps she took, or if she took none at all, something would be crushed, a person or the race. And it does feel that the tautness and tension throughout this story of identifying yourself with your race versus your desires, or how much pressure society places upon that identity. And it was really, really powerful in such a tiny, small package. So this was very well worth the afternoon that I gave it. Really, really enjoyed this. And funny enough, both of my 5-star reads so far this year have been little tiny books. So maybe I need to be picking up some tiny books this year. Maybe that's what I'm feeling, hard-hitting, short stuff. So yeah, this was, as I said, a 5-star read. I loved it. Really, really fantastic. Going into this week, I am finally making some progress on Master and Margarita. I'm about a third of the way through, so this is going to be my priority in print for the week, to go into March with a clean slate, hopefully. I'm also audiobooking Three Mothers by Malaika Tubbs, that is focused on the mothers of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., and James Baldwin, but it's not at all what I expected. However, it is fantastic. It's much more history focused than just the stories of the mothers. So really enjoying that one. I think that's it for books for this week. Like I said, I will be very much focused on Master and Margarita coming up. And then movies. I watched a couple of movies this week, actually. So I'm doing fantastically this year so far in watching movies, because that's something I really wanted to prioritize, because I never watch movies. So I watched 2 movies this week. I watched In for a Murder on Netflix, a Polish language murder mystery film, and I enjoyed it a ton. I really, really liked it. So this is the story of a woman who is a former veterinarian that is now a stay-at-home mom, goes out to walk her dog and finds a body. And the big hook for the story is that this body has a necklace on that's connected with someone she knew who disappeared a while ago, yet like years ago. And so she becomes very wrapped up in this mystery of who is this person, how are they connected to the person that she knew, and they were clearly murdered. So what happened with this murder? So I think that's all you would want to know going into the plot, but I think if this were a book, it would be a cozy mystery, and I liked that aspect of it the most, I think, because we have an amateur sleuth. Obviously she's got a dog. There's no on-screen graphic violence. There are a lot of kind of cozy small town elements. It's clearly a very small connected community. The local vet is trying to get her to come back to work, and so there's a lot of foibles about that, or comedy of errors sort of to do with that, and I really enjoyed that aspect. I also think whoever did the set design and styling did a fantastic job, because it's very bright and colorful. There are pops of color all throughout, and I think that made it more cozy feeling. So I just very much enjoyed that movie. And then I continued on my journey through the DC Universe films and watched The Suicide Squad, the 2016 one. Big step up from Batman vs. Superman. The performances were very good, I would say, to start. That was a big improvement. Jared Leto, Margot Robbie, and Viola Davis were all absolutely fantastic. I don't know why people keep hiring Cara Delevingne for her acting or paying her to act, because they clearly know in this film that she cannot act and do a lot of tricks to avoid showing her. Like, there are no long shots, they're constantly cutting away from her. The only long shots we do get of her are of her back. And so they clearly realize and are doing tricks to avoid any acting from her. And I don't understand how she's getting paid to do it. Or maybe she's doing it for free, I don't know. But the actual film was okay. Because it's about like 10% actual plot. There's very little story to this movie. It's all introducing the characters individually and then let's bring the crew together. And so that's kind of all that happens. And it feels like that could have been much more abbreviated. And this felt like a very long movie. Again, after Batman vs. Superman, I was a little relieved because the performances were compelling enough that I was fine with watching a longer movie, but it was still not fantastic. It was a very insubstantial movie. At least we had some likable characters, even though they're baddies. Maybe them being baddies was the really compelling part. So I think that's what I watched this week. My week this week was quiet. I don't actually know what happened all this week. I feel like the week flew by and I don't know where it went. So that's proving to be a problem this year, actually. I don't know what is going on mindset-wise, that I'm just sort of feeling the months slip through my fingers right now. Like, we're already heading into March here and I don't feel like I've done anything. I think I'm still dealing with mentally recovering from the end of last year being extremely stressful with the holidays and stuff I was doing to get work done on my house, and now I should just be waiting, but we've had a couple of things go wrong with the microwave and stuff. Having to mentally deal with that has been a big mental load on me, I think. And so I just haven't had the mental energy or the spoons to put toward really thinking about what's happening. It's mainly just keep moving forward. So my weeks are just kind of passing me by, unfortunately. So I think that's it for me for my recommendations this week. I have one really great one. Daisy Ex Machina, who does mainly science fiction and some fantasy booktubing, did a great video on Octavia E. Butler. Less on her books and more on her as a person. Really fantastic, concise and to the point, but full of details and information. So I heartily recommend that you check out that video this week. I think that's it for me today. Thank you so very much for watching.